Hello, everybody. Brian here from quantlabsnet.com. Uh, Thought I'd try to do a podcast, relaunching my podcast from a few years ago. I used to do Quant Live Trading Report. Just kind of fooling around, just trying to gather the reach. So, welcome. I used to have one on a platform called Podbean. We got over 350,000 downloads. So maybe you might find us from that. But we're relaunching here to be hosted on the most popular platform, Spotify. So enough of that. Let's talk about a big thing that I've been seeing in the markets for the last, I don't know, year or two. I'm looking at an article here found from efinancialcareers.com. And this is we'll call it a near and dear topic that I've never talked about. That's why I like doing these podcasts before. But here we're going to be all original. But let's talk about this. So the headline on this article is a lot of masters in finance programs are ripping off candidates and need to be shut down. Um, so let's get into this. You didn't get a finance internship. You didn't get a job after graduation. You still want to work in finance. And should you double down and pay the big money for masters in finance to stay in the game? Masters in finance will cost you anywhere from 28,000 at Barrick to 119,000 at Yale and 56,000 pounds at Oxford. There are many masters in finance courses out there. Some are worthy. Some may turn out to be worth nothing at all. Okay, this is a big topic. A lot of you go on YouTube, a lot of people say, "Yeah, you don't need university anymore; it's worthless." Here how is really how it boils down to. So when you're, let's say, graduating from the equivalent of high school in North America, you need to make that really critical choice in life, and you need to have that choice uh, in place by the time you're around 18 to 20, because that choice will probably the most important choice in your life. What do you want to do with your life? So if you're a smarty pants in school, namely in high school or wherever you're going into, coming from, um, and there's a couple of things you need to figure out. Where do you want to go? A lot of youngins want to get into finance because of the big pay. You know, 400, 500,000 pay packages, a million plus, certain years later. Yes, those exist. Those definitely do exist. Here's the problem is that a lot of the firms that you want to work at need you to have a university degree. There's only one career path that maybe you don't need a degree, and that's getting um, into portfolio management. So depending upon where you want to go in the quant trading field or quant research field, you definitely need to get an Ivy League school behind you, master's, PhD. Okay. And if you're top of the class, you shouldn't have a problem getting a job. A lot of the big firms will hunt you down. Basically, that's what the recruiters' jobs are. If you're in top, now, if you're in the bottom, I don't know, quarter, let's say, yeah, you will struggle. So it's never a guarantee. So if that's a career path you choose, you could do that. Some other people may take these courses or programs in university, masters, PhD, for the challenge of um, if you come from a well-off family and dad, mom asks you, what do you want to do? You say, I want to do this. And they can afford it. They'll send you off. Um, the tour I was on last year in Switzerland, met a very, very wealthy Malaysian family, and they were very proud to send their kids off to boarding schools, proud of their two daughters to come out of university. These are the kind of families I'm talking about. So obviously that's rare. There's the working, what's it called, the working class, the blue collar. Uh, so you got that choice to make. So if you don't feel confident in the schooling and you're kind of like me, maybe at the time you don't know, but you have the entrepreneurial blood in you and you want to be your own trading your own trading guru, I guess, your own quant trading guru, or you're a all-star programmer because you stayed on your Friday nights and on Friday nights. I only say that because that's what I did for a length of time, and I kind of got to a point where, yeah, I could master C, no problem. But the problem was that now it's blown up to 150 million different other programming languages. Back then, there was only four or five. I'm not talking about the late 80s. So those are the critical choices you have if you want to get into space. So if you're wanting to get into quant and you don't have the schooling, you don't have the money to back you, yeah, I consider looking at the self-employment route to be your own trader, I guess. I mean, that's why I got turned on to this because of back in '08, 2008, I did see and it just stuck out at me. It was Dr. Ernie Chan's book, um, Your Own Quant Trading Business. That's how I got started, inspired by it. And actually, I was fortunate enough to have him live pretty close to me. So I met him multiple times back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12 period, and got to know him pretty good. And that's why I got one of the Fords mentioned in two of his books, in the first editions, that is. So I got to know him very well. He's a smart guy, very smart. Obviously, he's even better now, doing well in the and doing all the YouTubes and all that, and getting out there, getting his name out there. He's done very well for himself. Anyways, so that's where we're at. It's like depending upon where you want to go with yourself. So if you're able to, and then you also have the AI. You have the artificial intelligence against you as well. I sent somebody a listing from one of those. Can't remember what you call them, the icon, whatever they call them. It had a list of the top 10 fastest growing jobs. Not one of those jobs had IT or programming in there. Usually, up to a couple of years ago, programming, tech, IT were always the first three for sure. Not one job in that field. And programming or IT was in the fastest growing top 10 now in 2025. In June 2nd, 2025. That's where we're at. So, yeah, we need to figure that out. So if you want to do this sort of stuff on your own, go for it. I've spent last couple of weeks, probably a couple of months, banging out some stellar projects with AI and doing all the code generating, all the youngins call it vibe coding, which is all fine and good. But if that's your way of learning, that's fine. But then you got to know how to reverse engineer the code that's generated and put the time in to play with the AI and reverse engineer the code. That's what you got to do to learn outside of university. So that's one option and path you can go down. Um, but if you should be, if you're going to go down that path, if you're going to learn that way, that's fine. Um, and you don't want to become lazy as well, like in my case, where you don't spend time on the code that's generated, because you need to be fairly accomplished to know how to debug the code, especially with the complicated runtime errors and exceptions that you can get if it's C++ or Python. So you got to be good at that. So programming is still good if you're going to do it yourself and build out your own trading firm for yourself and maybe run AI. And then there's that joke about out there who's going to be the first unicorn, one person unicorn of a billion plus. I think it's going to happen at some point. And trading is one place to go. And trading is very good because, as we know, a lot of the wealthiest people out there run hedge funds. Just saying. Anyways, continuing along with this article, I know I diatribe there. A lot of these masters in finance courses are ripping off candidates charging obscene amounts of money and need to be shut down. So this guy is a Mark Ross, careers coach turned CEO. I feel really bad for the people who signed them up. Okay, so that's all fine and good. Let's see what we got here. Ross is at naming no names in terms of courses. Look, if you're gonna pay 28K for Barrick, obscene amount of 120,000 at Yale. I mean that's a lot of money, and it gets worse for people here as well. So Ross is naming no names in terms of courses. He himself is a graduate of Masters of Financial Engineering at Barrick. which is broadly recognized as one of the best schools in the U.S. market, recently released figures for employment of Barrick of MFEs 5 years after graduating showed median pay ranging from 275 to 325. That's pretty good. And the bulk of alumni working for banks, 39%, and hedge funds at 32%. So that's a whole point of why those schools are very expensive, because those schools know that a lot of their graduates will probably get into jobs where that fee that they pay over 4 or 5 years will be paid back in spades within the first 2 years. I remember when I was coming out with Harvard, which was very, very expensive at the time. Like I think it was like 15 grand back in '92. Um, the philosophy was, well, you will be able to pay this back, all school debt within 4 or 5 years of your career at the beginning. And that was a logic, and that's carried out. But now they've amplified these tuition fees like immensely. However, now this is where it gets concerning. However, a significant chunk of people who complete a master's in finance or MFE can't find a job after graduation. A recent survey by Giuseppe Paliogo, head of quantitative research at hedge fund uh, Balasini, found that 30% of MFE graduates don't have a job, that a similar percentage of graduates say the career opportunities on offer to them have been misrepresented and they're unhappy with their career outcomes. All right. So I'll come back to that. So the same guy ran a survey inspired by an ex post from Christina QI at MIT graduate who runs a market data firm. I've talked about that firm, Data BenQ, I think it's called. Key observed that master's program has sprung up as feeders for electronic trading firms like Jane Street and Citadel. These are now 100 plus programs funneling thousands of applicants toward a handful of seats. She said, as course churn out students, even MFE graduates with perfect GPAs and top internships are struggling to get those jobs they want. Okay, so there's a couple of problems here I see. When these schools came out with Masters of Financial Engineering, Masters, and whatever, there was like 100 of these schools started focusing on these programs, and there's hundreds of them. Then and that was just focusing on, let's say, the markets of the Western world being, traditional, we call them Five Eyes, English speaking, US, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. Back then, that's who these schools focused on. So now the world's completely opened up, where you got India, China, throughout Asia, Latin America, Russia, blah, 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 right? So now you got more talent coming in, more students coming into these programs, and more schools trying to um, serve this type of demand. And to be truthful, the only schools that will get you these type of high-paying jobs, specifically in the I guess Ivy League hedge funds, Jane Street, Citadel, are only going to focus on the MITs, the Harvards, and the really Ivy League schools. I've talked about that before. So that's the problem. And yet they charge, as I said earlier, all these type of fees because they know that the median pay 275 to 325. So that's the logic there. Okay. So we've gotten to a point now where um, too many students, too many programs for all these little jobs. Now, the question becomes, is it worthwhile pursuing these type of degrees? My answer is it depends. And it comes back to what I said before. If you want to play the lottery, because it's kind of what it is, you don't know who you're competing against when you go in these schools. You don't know what happens when you put all the money and effort, blood, sweat, and tears to graduate from these programs. Um, okay, so we'll just say the competition's fierce. So is it worth pursuing? Um, but if you're doing it for self-learning, I would say yes. If it's um, for potentially in any of these jobs, yes, because there's so many firms out there that I've looked at over the last few months They will not, there's very few, I should say, uh, in the minority of minority that will take a applicant without a degree. Okay, that's straight up. So if you want to get anywhere into this field, in the high paying markets like New York and London, you got to have a degree. It's your ticket of entry. Okay. I took a degree. I got a degree for that. And that's all it really is. The stats are you only use 15% of what you learn in school, 4 years of this, 4 years left. You only use 15% of that in your life, maybe in the first few years. So people will think that that's a waste. That's fine. But the other thing that these so-called gurus on YouTube and social media don't really understand, they're just talking mouthpiece pieces. Okay, meaning they don't understand that when you go into these programs, it's all about priority management. It's all about project management and prioritizing your time. That's what these schools do. Learning these programs, that's what they're for. And that's a top skill you'll get in these schools. No matter, well, a like using whatever degree. We're not talking about humanities here. We're not talking about underwater basket weaving. We're talking about real degrees that have an applicable use in some form. That's what these, I don't want to say fools, but they don't understand. That's why you're taking these programs because you understand about teamwork, collaborating in projects, building up your, if you go into any of these schools to boost your English skills, your communication skills, because those are the big markets, is New York and London. So you got to know English. Hate to say that. These are like soft skills that these programs, these degrees offer, and that's what you mostly get out of it. Okay, because it's very easy to talk to some of these so-called guru economists on YouTube, and they go on about all this stuff. But yet, if you ask them what drives inflation, they'll say, "Oh, it's because of the shortage of the supplies of the supply chain is disrupted," which is utter BS. We know that. Okay, if you take economics 101, you know the real reason. And that's the difference between top folks and the rest of them, just say. I would say the dumb money versus the smart money, right? No difference. That's what the schools offer. Now, is it a crime for a school to charge this kind of money? I think it is. But, but, you have to ask yourself, how important is it? And what are the odds that you'll make it into these Ivy League schools based upon what I read, where where this Christina E is saying, as courses churn out students, even MFE graduates with perfect GPAs and top internships are struggling to get jobs they want. Okay. And the other problem is we also, and I've seen this trend, is during an interview, you'll chat GPT your way through it. When you get into actual on a trading desk or some high pressure environment, you'll fail. Okay. And another thing you need to understand is from the internal perspective of these firms, and I've been told this multiple times, and this is from somebody who worked at Goldman Sachs as well. These firms compete against each other. They're competing for the top talent today, even. And one of the big things they look at is if they bring in somebody from a college, a garage operation or something, and they fail as an employee in that firm, that top honchos are going to be questioning who hired this person? Why did they get hired? And now, how did they fail at the job? The people recruiting these folk will be questioned if they fail. So it's the insurance, the top insurance that they have is if they hire somebody from Harvard, MIT, okay, and just for whatever reason that person fails at their job, at least the recruiter can come back saying to the head honcho, saying, "Hey, look, he failed, but he's still from MIT and Harvard." And it doesn't look so bad when they're from Harvard and MIT level kind of schools. People need to understand that as well. Okay, so let's continue in this article. This is going to be a long one. Okay. So yeah, let's see what we got here. So questions about the value of some courses are being raised as both US and UK, see, top two educational markets, are clamping down on the employment of overseas students, with the US this week temporarily halting interviews for the award of study visas. Even before the new restrictions, students say it was overseas graduates who found it hardest to gain employment after a financial service focused master's. One student in London told us his university had been using postgraduate employment rates for domestic students as a selling point for students coming from abroad. When you get into a master's level, everybody pays the same. Okay. When you're an undergraduate, the locals of that school pay, call it a discounted rate. But if you're an international student coming in the undergraduate, you pay a lot more. That's how it used to be. So now at PhD and master level, everybody pays the same. Now, also take it from a politician standpoint or take it from, I don't know, statistical. If a local market has all these graduates who want to go in these firms, my belief is that that school is there to serve the local population. So let's say an American school, priority should go to the American students without question. Same in Britain as well. Back in my time, there used to be a time where you used to go to university in Scotland free, or you go to university. I think it was called European University to do education for free at master's or and PhD level. It was free. That was in the early 90s. So that's my belief on it. But because there's so much supply of students now, this is where we get this problem, and it becomes an employment problem where you have high unemployment at the local level. But this is all politics. So I'm not going to go too much into that. That's how I look at it. So, how do you know if the master's in finance course you're considering is worthwhile? Most obviously, is a ranking from trusted sources like the Financial Times. There's lots of places as well. Europe pre-existent master courses like those at St. Gallen in Switzerland, HEC in Paris, ESCP Business School in Europe often rank highly and may give you another good shot at getting an internship and then a job. That's true, but you're not probably going to get into one of the big banking firms. They'll question your degree. They'll question you as well if you're not coming from the top school. And a lot of people may not like that, but that's the truth. That's their honest, hard knocks truth. Okay. I'm not here to sweeten the pie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's not who I am. What about the courses that don't get you a job? Ross, there's ways of sniffing them out. Firstly, they're easy to get into. They won't expect you to have any prior financial services experiences when you apply, even an internship. This is a red flag. Let me just repeat this. Ross says there are ways first that they are easy to get onto. They won't expect you to have any prior financial service experience when you apply, even an internship. This is a red flag. Second, they mostly accept overseas applicants. Thirdly, they don't offer very detailed information on the actual careers of their alumni. How do they earn? What percentage are in employment? Where? What percentage are out of work? And that's true how you can look at a school. But if it's not a name brand school, chances are you're going to have difficulties there. But if you want to learn, you learn. If you want to be challenged, you go into Ivy League schools. It's how it's always been. A long list of past employers or jobs is meaningless without the time period in proportion of the graduating class it applies to. Even these figures can be gamed. In some cases, students are presented as employed while working for funds sponsored by the school. That's true. They will charge you 100K and leave you to rot, says Ross, of the worst masters in finance courses. Ideally, he says you need to know your own significant due diligence before signing up. The first thing you should do is to talk to the actual students from the last cohort. Reach out to them and have a conversation. You might be unpleasantly surprised. How's that done? I maybe whoever's listening to this should have a conversation with this Ross guy. I don't know how you contact past students in a program unless you know them. They will charge you 100K and leave you. In the worst case scenario, Ross says overseas students who spend 100K on U.S. masters in finance courses return to their home countries for jobs they pay a fraction of that amount. They're saddled with debt and their dreams are shattered. It's a sorry situation that should be avoided. Um, I don't know. It's pretty extreme views there, but whatever. I think it's more like to understand the reality of the situation. The other option you have, as I said, if you are motivated to do this on your own, be it via the AI, as I said, to reverse engineer generated code or whatever, you can do that. So again, what I'm doing is just go over to my website, quantlabsnet.com/registration, and you get on your way to the newsletter that we put out. And I'm putting out multiple days of content now to help people and to learn about quant analysis and programming. I also just launched last week a 7-day trial to my private membership. As I build that out, I won't be sharing this kind of information. I don't think it's just too valuable for knowledge. Anyways, leave it at that. Thanks for watching, um, and have yourselves a nice day wherever you are. Over and out.